The seal came down wrong, and I was the only one close enough to see it, and I said nothing, which is how every good story of a coward begins, and I was the coward, so let me tell it honestly from the start. My name is Elena Core. For 11 years I have been a lady-in-waiting to Queen Saralind of Eldermore, which is a grander phrase than the work deserves. I carry her letters. I keep her small hours quiet. I stand behind her chair at the ceremonies with my hands folded and my face composed, and I have learned, as everyone who serves close to a throne must learn, how to be present and invisible at the same time. It is a useful skill and a dangerous one, because a woman who has trained herself to be invisible is very good at persuading herself that whatever she witnesses is not hers to speak of. That was the lesson I had to unlearn, and it took a guard who never moved and a child of 8 to teach it to me. I want to be fair to the kingdom of Eldermore, because I love it, and because the thing that happened here could happen in any house where power grows quietly in a corner nobody thinks to watch. We are a small realm and a proud one. The royal house of Harrowgate has held Harrowgate Palace for 400 years, and Queen Saralind is, I say this as a woman who has emptied her wash basin and read her private grief in the set of her shoulders, a good queen. Not a soft one, she can be flint when flint is called for, but good in the way that matters, which is that she believes the crown is a debt owed to the people beneath it and not a prize won above them. Beside her stands the prince consort Aldrich, a mild and clever man who is content to be the second light in any room she enters, and they have 2 children. Prince Joran, who is 10, grave and dutiful and forever trying to be older than he is, and Princess Malin, who is 8. Everyone underestimated Malin. I will not pretend I was any better than the rest at first. She was a small, watchful girl with her mother's dark eyes and a habit of going quiet in a room full of talking adults, and the court read that quiet as shyness or as a child's proper deference, and patted her head and moved on. It was neither. Malin was not quiet because she had nothing to say. She was quiet because she was listening, and she had learned the way clever children in grand houses learn, that the things she said were received the way one receives a posy from a small hand, with a smile, a thank you, and no further thought. She had learned that her voice was an ornament, and she had not yet decided what to do about that. The seal I mentioned belonged to the Comptroller of the household seal, and her name was Lady Ravenna Thorne. You must understand what that office is, because the whole of this turns on it. In older reigns the queen sealed her own household decrees with her own hand, pressing her private seal into the hot wax herself. But a modern crown signs 100 small orders a week, grants of position, charters of the lesser estates, warrants for the royal purse, the endless paper by which a palace feeds and pays and governs itself, and no monarch can press everyone. So the private seal was given into the keeping of a trusted officer, the Comptroller, who holds the matrix, the carved silver die that makes the mark, and who applies it to the decrees the Queen has approved. It is an office of enormous quiet power and almost no glamour. The Comptroller does not sit at the head of the table. She sits at the side of the room with a box of wax and a warming lamp, and the single object in the palace that can turn a piece of paper into the will of the crown. And for 6 years, that object had lived in the careful, ringed, capable hands of Lady Ravenna Thorne. I disliked her, and I want to be honest that I disliked her before I had any reason beyond instinct, so you may weigh my account accordingly. She was a handsome woman of perhaps 50, silver-haired and straight-backed, with a voice like cool water and manners so perfect they felt less like courtesy than like a wall. She had come to the household in the middle years of the late king's reign and risen through the offices no one else wanted, the ledgers, the seals, the registries, the dull machinery of the place, until she held more of the palace's paper in her hands than anyone but the queen herself. She was never rude. She never raised her voice. She agreed with everyone and yielded to no one, and she had a way of making a person feel that any question they asked her was slightly beneath the dignity of the asking. The other ladies admired her, the ministers deferred to her, and I, who am nobody, disliked her and kept it to myself as one does. The night it began was the eve of Founding Day. Founding Day is our oldest festival, the anniversary of the charter that made Eldermore a kingdom rather than a cluster of quarreling holds, and the palace marks it with the investiture, a great ceremony in the throne room where the queen confers honors and confirms appointments and reads out the year's grants before the whole assembled court. It is the one day when the dull paper of the realm is made loud and public. The charters that were signed and sealed in silence all year are read aloud from the dais, and the men and women they concern come forward to be recognized. It is, in other words, the one day when the sealing of the household seal is not a private act in a side room, but a public accounting before the entire court. That mattered more than I understood at the time. The eve of Founding Day is the night the final decrees are prepared, and on that night, by long custom, the Queen holds a small private reception in the Amber Room, just the household, the senior officers, the children permitted for once to stay up late, while in the adjoining chamber the last charters are laid out for sealing, so that everything is ready for the morning. I was in the Amber Room, behind the Queen's chair, doing my invisible work. And through the open double doors I could see into the sealing chamber, where Lady Ravenna Thorne sat at her long table with her warming lamp and her box of dark red wax, pressing the private seal into the last of the year's decrees. And I saw the seal come down wrong. I will tell you exactly what I mean, because it is the small thing on which everything hangs. I have watched Ravenna Thorne seal 1,000 documents. It is a particular motion. She warms the wax, lets a bead of it fall, and presses the silver matrix straight down with the flat of her hand, a firm, even pressure, and lifts it clean. The mark it leaves is the Queen's private device, a harrow crossing a rising sun, the old badge of the House of Harrowgate, fine as lace, so detailed that a magnifying glass shows the individual teeth of the harrow. I had seen it 10,000 times without ever looking at it, the way you stop seeing a thing you see every day. But that night, as I happened to glance through the doors, Lady Thorne did something I had never seen her do. She sealed a decree, pressed, lifted, and then she paused and she looked at the mark and she frowned. And then she took a small blade from her sleeve and she scraped the seal off. She scraped it clean off the paper, gathered the crumbs of wax into her palm, dropped them into the lamp's little flame, and then she reached into a second box. A box I had never seen before, a plain box she kept apart from her working box, and she took out a different matrix, and she sealed the decree again. 2 seals, she kept 2 seals. I did not understand it. I told myself a dozen innocent things in the space of a breath, that the first impression had been flawed, that the wax had been too cool, that she was merely fastidious. All of them were reasonable. All of them were the little lies a person tells herself to avoid the enormous truth standing plainly in front of her. Because a controller of the household seal has 1 seal, that is the entire point of the office. The seal is the crown's own hand. There is not a spare. There cannot be a spare. A second matrix in a second box, taken out in secret and pressed onto a decree after the first one had been scraped away and burned. I did not have a word for what that was, that night, but I had the cold feeling in my stomach that a person gets when their mind has understood a thing that their heart is not ready to say. And here is my shame. I said nothing. I told myself it was not my place. I am a lady in waiting, not an officer of the seal, and what did I know of the proper handling of wax? I told myself I had seen it wrong, from across 2 rooms in bad light. I told myself 100 careful things, and I folded my hands, and I kept my composed and invisible face, and I let the eve of Founding Day go on around me as if I had seen nothing at all. But someone else had seen it too. There was a guard on the door between the Amber Room and the sealing chamber. There is always a guard there on ceremonial nights, one of the palace's own, not the tourist-facing men at the outer gates, but the inner guard, sworn to the household, standing his post inside the very rooms where the business of the crown is done. His name was Corvin Ash, and I knew him only the way you know a piece of the furniture you pass every day, A tall, still man in the red tunic and the tall black bearskin, white-gloved, his rifle grounded, his eyes forward, his face giving nothing. The guards are not permitted to speak on duty. They are not permitted to turn their heads or follow a thing with their eyes or let any flicker of what they see reach their faces. It is a discipline so complete that the court forgets they are men at all. We conducted our whole lives in front of them and never thought about it. The way you never think about the clock on the wall that is quietly keeping every hour of your life. I did not know, that night, that Corvin Ash had been watching Lady Ravenna Thorne for a very long time. I did not know that a guard's stillness is not blindness, that a man trained to stand motionless for 6 hours becomes, of necessity, the most patient observer in any room, because looking is the only thing left to him to do. I did not know that the thing I had seen once and talked myself out of, he had seen a dozen times and could not. I only knew that night that when I glanced from the sealing chamber back into the amber room, my eye passed across the guard on the door, and for the smallest fraction of an instant, so brief I could have imagined it, his eyes were not forward. They were on Lady Thorne's plain second box, and then they were forward again and his face was stone, and I told myself I had imagined that too. I was very good in those days, at telling myself I had imagined things. The reception wound toward its close. The Queen rose and the court rose with her, and the children were gathered up to be taken to bed, Joran walking with the stiff dignity of a boy who has been allowed to stay up and means to prove he deserved it, and Malin at his side, her dark eyes moving over the room the way they always did, taking in more than anyone credited. And as she passed the doors of the sealing chamber, the princess slowed, only for a step. She looked in at Lady Thorne and her lamp and her boxes of wax, and something small and thoughtful crossed her face, and then her nurse's hand was on her shoulder, and she was drawn on toward bed. I have wondered since what she saw. Children see the seams in things that adults have learned to look past. I think Malin, in that one slowing step, saw something that lodged in her the way the second box had lodged in me. A wrongness she did not have the word for, but did not forget. I think it went asleep in her that night and woke up when it was needed. But that is ahead of the story. What I knew, lying awake that night in my narrow room off the Queen's apartments, was a single hard fact turning over and over. I had seen the Comptroller of the household seal press a secret second seal onto a crown decree and burn the evidence of the first, and I had said nothing. And in the morning that decree would be read aloud before the entire court as the confirmed and lawful will of Queen Saralind, and I did not know what it said. I did not sleep, and in the gray before dawn I got up, and I did the smallest brave thing I have ever done, which did not feel brave at all. I went to find out what was in the decree Lady Ravenna Thorne had sealed twice. That was the first thread. I did not know, pulling it, that it ran all the way down to the foundations of the house, or that before founding day was 3 days old, it would bring the whole silver-haired edifice of Lady Thorne crashing down in front of the assembled court, undone at the last not by me, and not by the guard who had watched her longer than any of us, but by the smallest and most underestimated voice in the palace. Let me tell you how we got there. The decrees for the morning were kept in the registry room, a long chamber lined floor to ceiling with the deed boxes of the realm, where the household's paper lives its quiet life. On an ordinary day, I would have no more business there than a cat has in a chapel, but the eve of founding day is not ordinary, and a lady-in-waiting on the Queen's errand can go a good many places without being questioned, provided she walks as though she has been sent. I have carried the Queen's letters for 11 years. I know how to walk as though I have been sent. The registry clerk was a mild young man named Piet who had the night watch and the beginnings of a beard he was proud of, and he looked up when I came in with the particular hope of a young man who is bored and would welcome any excuse for conversation. Her Majesty wishes to see the order of the founding day grants before they are read, I told him, which was not true, and which he had no reason to doubt. The list and the decrees themselves, I am to check the sequence. He fetched them without a murmur. That is the thing about a great house. Its defenses are all pointed outward, at the gates and the walls, and inside it runs on trust, on the assumption that anyone already within these rooms belongs there. It is a beautiful assumption, and it is exactly the crack through which a Ravenna Thorne climbs. I read the list of grants by the clerk's lamp, and most of it was the dull confirmations of any year: a warden reappointed, a bridge fund renewed, a widow's pension continued. And then, near the bottom, in the plain, careful hand of the Comptroller's office, I found it. A grant of the wardship and revenues of the estate of Greywater to the trust of the house of Marrow, to be administered during the minority of its heir by the Lady Ravenna Thorne, Comptroller of the household seal, and her assigns. I read it 3 times. I am not a woman of estates, and I did not, that gray morning, understand a tenth of what it meant. But I understood the shape of it, because the shape of it was the shape of a hand reaching quietly into a pocket that was not its own. Greywater was one of the great crown estates, I knew that much, held in trust for a young heir whose family had died. Its revenues meant to keep and school the child until he came of age. And this decree, sealed twice the night before with a secret second matrix and read aloud in a few hours as the confirmed will of the Queen, handed the whole of it, the wardship, the revenues, the administration, into the keeping of Lady Ravenna Thorne. The Queen would never have signed that. I did not need to be an officer of the crown to know it. Saralyn did not enrich her officers from the estates of orphaned children. It was the precise opposite of everything I had watched her be for 11 years. And yet here was the decree, sealed and ready, and in a few hours it would be law, and after that, after the whole court had heard it read and no one had objected, after that it would be a very hard thing indeed to undo, because to undo it would be to say that the crown's own seal had lied, and the crown does not easily admit that its own hand cannot be trusted. That was the scheme. I saw the whole of it then, cold and clean. She was not stealing gold from a box. She was using the seal itself, the one instrument in the realm that could not be questioned, to write her own will into the record of the crown, and she had chosen the founding day decrees because the very publicness of the reading would armor the lie. Once a thing is proclaimed before the whole court and confirmed and applauded, who then stands up and calls it forged? The public reading was not a risk to her. It was her fortress. And I had until the reading to do something, and I had no proof but my own eyes across 2 rooms in bad light, and the word of a lady-in-waiting against the Comptroller of the household seal is the word of a mouse against a wall. I put the decree back exactly as I had found it. I thanked young Piet. And I went out into the corridor and stood with my back against the cold stone and my heart going like a hunted thing. And it was there, in the gray hour before the palace woke, that the guard found me. I did not hear him come, which tells you something about how a man of that size can move when he chooses. One moment I was alone with my fear, and the next there was a shape in the dim corridor, tall and unhurried, and I nearly cried out before I saw the red of the tunic and the shape of the bearskin under his arm. For he was off his post now, in the between hours, carrying his headdress the way a working man carries his hat. "You were in the amber room last night," Corvin Ash said. His voice was low and even and entirely without the deference the household paid the Queen's ladies. It was the voice of a man stating a fact. "You saw the second box." I ought to have denied it. Every instinct of 11 careful years told me to deny it, to say I did not know his meaning, to walk on. Instead I heard myself say, in a small voice I did not recognize, I told myself I imagined it. "You didn't," he said. We looked at each other in the gray light, the guard and the lady-in-waiting, 2 pieces of the palace's furniture who had each, separately, seen the same wrong thing and each, separately, been trained our whole lives to say nothing about it. And something passed between us in that look, not friendship. We were near strangers, but a kind of recognition. The relief of a person who has been carrying a stone alone and discovers, suddenly, another set of hands. "How long have you known?" I asked. "I have suspected for a year," he said. "I have been certain for 3 months. I have been able to prove it for exactly no time at all, which is why I have stood at my post and said nothing, because a guard who accuses the controller of the household seal with a suspicion and no proof is a guard dismissed by noon, and then there is no one left inside these rooms who is watching her at all." He said it without bitterness, as a man reports the weather. "So I watch. And I wait for the one thing that will let me speak." "The seal," I said. "The second seal, that is the proof." "That is the proof," he agreed. "If it can be found and shown and set beside the true one, so that any man with 2 eyes can see the forgery. A false seal is not like a false ledger, my lady. A ledger is numbers, and numbers can be argued, and a clever tongue can talk a court in circles until everyone is too tired to care. But a seal is a thing you can hold. The true matrix and the false one side by side, the harrow's teeth that do not quite match, the sun that is a hair too high, that is a proof a child could read. It cannot be argued. It can only be seen." He paused. "But she keeps the false one on her body or under lock, and I cannot search the controller of the household seal on a guard's suspicion. So I have the proof, and I cannot reach it, and the decree is read in 5 hours." And there we stood, the 2 of us, each holding half of a truth and neither able to make it whole, exactly as Ravenna Thorne had counted on. She had built her whole scheme on the certainty that the people who might see it were the very people trained to stay silent and powerless. The invisible lady, the immovable guard. She had spent 6 years teaching the palace that its watchers do not speak. She had made only one mistake, though none of us saw it yet. She had let a child slow her step at the sealing chamber door. Corvin Ash and I agreed on a plan in that gray corridor that was barely a plan at all. It was more a shared refusal to do nothing. He would return to his post, because a guard suddenly absent draws the eye. I would try, in the little time before the ceremony, to reach the queen. That last was harder than it sounds. You do not simply walk up to a monarch on the morning of a great festival and tell her that her most trusted officer is a forger. The queen on founding day is not a woman you can catch alone. She is a schedule, a procession, a sequence of dressers and secretaries and ministers, each with a claim on her minutes. And what would I say if I reached her? That I had seen, from across 2 rooms in bad light, a motion of the hand that I had interpreted as villainy. Saralind is fair, but she is not a fool, and Ravenna Thorne had served her faithfully, visibly, tirelessly, faithfully, for 6 years. If I came to her with a suspicion and no proof, the kindest outcome was that she would gently disbelieve me. The likeliest was that Lady Thorne, who missed nothing, would hear that a lady-in-waiting had spoken against her, and would have me quietly removed from the household by week's end, and would then be free of the one witness who had seen the second box. I would have spent my only shot to no purpose, and left the princess's estate to be quietly devoured. I understood, standing in that corridor, the trap the controller had built, and its cruelty was in its simplicity. She had arranged matters so that the only honest move available to any of us was also the move most certain to destroy us and accomplish nothing. Speak too soon, with too little, and you are discredited and gone, and the forgery stands. It was not enough to know the truth. We had to be able to prove it, in public, in a way that could not be smoothed over, and we did not have the seal. I reached the queen's antechamber as she was being dressed for the investiture, and I got no further than her secretary, a courteous iron gate of a man named Halbrook, who informed me with genuine regret that Her Majesty could receive no one until after the ceremony, and was there a message. I looked at his kind, immovable face, and I understood that the machine of the palace was itself, without meaning to be, on Ravenna Thorne's side, that every rule of good order, every proper channel, every layer of protection built around the crown, was in this one matter a wall between the queen and the truth. I said there was no message. What message could I leave? I went to take my place for the ceremony with the decree still sealed, and the reading now less than an hour away. The throne room of Harrowgate is the great heart of the palace, a long hall of gray stone and gold, hung with the banners of 400 years, its high windows throwing long bars of founding day sun across the marble floor. At its far end the throne sits on its dais under the old heroine sun device carved into the wall, and before it, on founding day, the whole court assembles, the ministers in their chains of office, the great families in their finest, the officers of the household, the envoys of the neighboring realms come to mark our festival. It is the most public room in the kingdom on the most public day, and it was, I understood now, the perfect stage for a lie, because a lie proclaimed in that room, under that device, before that company, becomes almost impossible to call back. I took my place among the Queen's ladies, to the side and behind where the royal family would sit, and I found that I was standing near enough to see the whole floor of the hall. The Queen entered to the trumpets, gowned in the deep blue and silver of the House of Harrowgate, and the court bowed like a field of wheat in wind. The Prince Consort walked at her side. And behind them came the children, Joran in a small formal coat, his face set in the grave dignity he wore like armor, and Malin in a gown the pale gold of the morning windows, her dark eyes already moving over the hall, counting it, weighing it, in that way she had. And there at the side of the dais, at a small table draped in blue, sat Lady Ravenna Thorne with the box of the household seal before her. On founding day the Comptroller sits in state, because the sealing of the crown's paper is one of the honors the day displays. She was serene, silver and straight and perfectly composed, her ringed hands folded on the blue cloth, and I looked at her and felt sick, because she was so entirely certain, and her certainty was so nearly justified. Corvin Ash stood his post at the foot of the dais steps, one of a pair of guards flanking the way to the throne, immaculate and motionless, his eyes forward, giving nothing. I do not think one person in that hall of 300 spared him a glance. He was furniture. He was the red and black shape you expect to see at the foot of a throne and therefore do not see at all. And I alone in that room knew that behind his still face, a man was standing at the edge of the only chance he might ever have, calculating, as a soldier calculates, whether there was any move on the board that did not lose. The ceremony began. The honors were conferred. A general was raised, a scholar was thanked, a town was granted its new charter, and each time the herald read the decree aloud from the dais the court murmured its approval, and the person named came forward to kneel and be recognized. It was stately and slow and entirely lovely, and it moved with the awful inevitability of a river toward the moment I dreaded. I watched the herald's stack of decrees grow smaller. I watched Ravenna Thorne's serene folded hands. And I did the only thing left to me, which was to pray without much faith, that something, anything, would break the surface of that perfect morning before the Greywater grant was read. Something did, but not the way I had prayed for, and not at first in a way that helped at all. It was Malin. The children were seated to the side of the throne, as they always were at ceremonies, on two small chairs, expected to be silent and still and decorative for the 2 hours the thing required. Joran managed it. Joran had trained himself to it. But Malin, I saw, was not still. She was watching the Comptroller's table. She had been watching it, I realized, since she came in, her dark eyes returning to it again and again, to the blue cloth and the box and the silver-haired woman and her folded hands, the way a tongue returns to a sore tooth. Something at that table was troubling her, and she could not leave it alone, and being 8, she did what an 8-year-old does with a thing that troubles her. She leaned over to her brother and she whispered. I could not hear the words. No one could. It was a child's whisper in a great echoing hall full of ceremony. But I saw Joran's face, and I saw him frown and shake his head, the older brother's automatic dismissal, hush, not now, be still, and I saw Malin sit back, rebuffed, her small jaw setting in a line I would come to know very well before this was over. And I saw, at his table, Lady Ravenna Thorne turn her head a quarter-inch toward the children. Just a quarter-inch. Just enough. She had seen the princess watching her, and in the small, cool calculation that crossed her face I understood that Ravenna Thorne, who missed nothing, had added the watchful child to the list of things she would need to manage, and had already, in that quarter-inch turn, decided she could. The herald lifted the next decree. I saw the blue ribbon of the Comptroller's office on it. I saw, or thought I saw, the faint red disk of a doubled seal. My heart stopped. "By the grace of Her Majesty Queen Saralind," the herald read in his great carrying voice, "and under the seal of her household, the wardship and revenues of the estate of Greywater, held in trust for its heir during his minority, are hereby confirmed to the administration of the Lady Ravenna Thorne, Comptroller of the household seal, and her assigns, that the estate may be faithfully kept until the heir attains his majority." He read it as he read all the others, as a settled thing, a confirmed thing, the Queen's own will. And the court murmured its approval as it had murmured for all the others, because why would it not? The Comptroller was a trusted officer, and the keeping of an orphaned estate was a burden as much as an honor, and there was nothing in the words to alarm anyone who did not already know what I knew. Ministers nodded. Someone near me said quietly what a good and careful woman Lady Thorne was to take on such a charge. And Ravenna Thorne inclined her silver head in gracious acknowledgment, the very picture of duty accepted, and the river rolled on toward the next decree, and it was done. It was done. The lie had been read into the record of the Crown before 300 witnesses, and confirmed and applauded, and not one voice had risen against it. I felt the whole weight of it come down. This was exactly what she had planned. The public reading had not exposed her, it had crowned her. To undo it now, someone would have to stand up in front of the entire court and say that the Queen's own seal was a forgery and be able to prove it on the spot, because anything less would be treason or madness. We had missed our moment. There had been no moment. She had made sure of it. I looked at Corvin Ash at the foot of the dais, and his face gave nothing, as a guard's face must. But I had learned in one gray dawn to read the man a little, and I saw the smallest tightening at the corner of his jaw, the only grief he was permitted, and I knew that he knew it too. The decree was read. The seal was law, and the proof was still locked in a box on a body we could not search. I thought it was over. It was not over. It had, though none of us yet understood it, only just found the one person in that hall who was too young to know that it was hopeless. The investiture ended as it had begun, with trumpets and bows, and the court flowed out of the throne room into the corridors and the gardens to take its founding day feast, and I moved through the afternoon in a fog of defeat. I told myself the truest, most cowardly thing there is to tell oneself, that I had tried, that I had done what I could, that the moment had passed and no blame could fall on me now. It is astonishing how comforting a lie can be when you are frightened enough to want it. It was Malin who would not let me have it. I came upon her late in the afternoon in the long gallery that runs above the gardens, where I had gone to be alone with my failure. She was sitting on the deep sill of a window with her gold gown pooled around her, looking down at the feast on the lawns, and she was frowning that setting jaw frown. And when she saw me, she did not look away and smile as a court child is taught to. She looked at me the way she looked at everything, straight and weighing, and she said, "You saw it too." I stopped. "Saw what, princess?" "The seals," she said. "Lady Thorne has 2 seals." And she said it so plainly, so certainly, with the total lack of doubt that only a child or a saint can manage, that I sat down on the sill across from her before my legs had quite decided to. "Tell me," I said. "Tell me what you saw." And she told me. She was 8, and she told it the way an 8-year-old tells a thing, out of order and sideways, but she had seen it clean. On the eve of Founding Day, passing the sealing chamber door, she had looked in and seen Lady Thorne with 2 boxes, her red one that she always has, and a black one I never saw before, and she had thought nothing of it then. But at the ceremony that morning, watching from her little chair with nothing to do but watch, she had seen something that turned the memory over in her mind. When the Comptroller had sealed a document early in the ceremony, a small routine confirmation the herald handled first, She had used the red box. But there had been one decree, Malin did not know which, only that it came before the one about the estate, for which Lady Thorne had, under the cover of arranging her papers, opened the black box instead and taken something from it and closed it again quickly. I couldn't see very well, Malin said, scowling at her own limits. She had her arm in the way, but she does it like this. And the child mimed it, the small furtive substitution, the arm curved to screen the hand, and it was so exactly the motion I had seen through the doors the night before that the hair rose on my arms. She hides the black one. If it was allowed, why does she hide it? Why does she hide it? Out of the mouth of an 8-year-old came the whole case against Ravenna Thorne, stripped of every complication, reduced to the one question that mattered and that the entire clever apparatus of the court could not answer. If it was allowed, why does she hide it? I told Joran, Malin went on, and now the frown was hurt as well as fierce, and he said I was making things up. He said ladies don't have two seals and I didn't understand and I should be quiet. She said the word be quiet with a small, terrible weight, the weight of a child who has been told to be quiet her whole life by people certain they know better. And I tried to tell Nurse and she said the same. And her voice caught just slightly and then steadied. I know what I saw. I looked at this child, this 8-year-old whom the whole court had spent her whole life smiling over and talking past, and I felt something turn over in my chest that I can only call shame, not the small shame of my own silence, but a larger one, the shame of every adult in that palace who had trained this clear-seeing girl to believe that her sight was worth nothing. She had seen the exact thing the guard had spent a year proving and I had spent a night denying, and she had seen it plain, and she had tried to tell, and every grown and sensible person she told had patted her on the head and told her to be quiet. You did see it, I said. You saw it exactly right, I saw it too. And so did someone else. Her whole face changed. I have thought about that moment often, the way the child's face changed when, for the first time in her small life, an adult said to her not there, but you were right. It was not triumph. It was something quieter and deeper than triumph. It was the look of a person who has been alone in the dark and has just heard another voice say I am here too. I should not have told her. Every rule of my office, every instinct of protecting a child from an adult danger said that I should have soothed her and gone at once to the Queen. But I was past the reach of those rules by then, and besides, I will be honest, I was drowning, and she was the first solid thing I had touched. So I told her. I told her about the second box in the sealing chamber and the scraped-off seal, and the decree that gave her family's gave the Crown's estate of Greywater into Lady Thorne's hands. I told her, God help me, the whole of it to an 8-year-old on a windowsill, because she was the only person in the palace who already believed me. Greywater, Malin said slowly, and something moved behind her dark eyes. The boy at Greywater is Tomlin. He's my friend. I did not understand. Your friend. Papa took us there in the spring, she said. To Greywater. It's a big empty house with a lake and there's a boy who lives there named Tomlin and he's my age and he showed me the swans and we're friends. His mother and father are dead. Papa said we came so Tomlin would know he isn't alone because the Crown looks after him. She said the last part the way a child repeats a thing an adult has told her, holding it up as a promise, because the Crown looks after him. And then her small face went very still and she looked at me and she understood before I did in that leaping way children understand what the decree meant. If Lady Thorne has Greywater now, she said, then she has Tomlin's money and his house. And nobody's looking after him but her. Her voice dropped. And she has 2 seals and she hides the black one so she's a liar. And a liar isn't going to look after Tomlin at all. I sat on that windowsill and I could not speak, because the child had just walked in 4 sentences, the entire distance it had taken the guard a year and me a night of terror to cross, from a wrong motion of the hand to a real boy who would be robbed and left friendless behind a lie no adult would dare to call. And she had done it because to her it was not politics, not the seal of the Crown, not the awful, undoable weight of a public proclamation. It was Tomlin. It was her friend by the lake with the swans. She could see straight through the whole velvet apparatus of the court to the child at the bottom of it, because she was a child, and she had not yet learned to look away. "Princess," I said carefully, "this is a very dangerous thing to know. Lady Thorne is powerful. If she understood that you know it, that you've seen the black box, she would find a way to make certain you were never believed. She has already begun. She's very good at it. Grown men and women believe her over the truth. You must not, do you understand me? You must not go to her or accuse her or let her see that you know. Not yet. Not until we can prove it so that no one can smile it away." Malin considered this with the seriousness of a general. "Then we have to get the black box," she said. "The black seal. If we have both seals we can show they're different, and then she can't say I'm making it up." There it was again. And I found that I no longer had it in me to send her back to the nursery and out of this. She was in it. She had put herself in it, walking those swans in the spring, seeing that black box in the dark. She was, God help us all, the truest ally I had. "There is a guard," I said. "The one who was on the door last night. His name is Corvin Ash. He has watched Lady Thorne longer than any of us, and he understands the seal better than I do. We should tell him what you saw at the ceremony, that she used the black box this morning in the hall in front of everyone. He will know if that helps us." "The tall one who never moves," Malin said at once. Of course she knew him, she saw everything. He was watching her too, at the ceremony. His eyes went to her table when the herald read about Greywater. Everyone else was looking at Lady Thorne being gracious. He was looking at her hands. She nodded, satisfied, a child confirming a hidden fellowship she had already sensed. "He's the one who moves without moving. I saw. The one who moves without moving. I have never heard Corvin Ash described better before or since, and it was an 8-year-old who found the words." That was the turn of the whole affair, though it did not announce itself. Up to that afternoon on the windowsill, this had been a story of watchers who could not speak. The guard, the lady, each trapped alone inside the discipline of not speaking, each holding half a truth that could not be made whole. From that afternoon it became something else. It became 3 of us, and the third was a child whom no rule bound to silence, whom no oath held to her post, whom the court had so thoroughly dismissed that she could move through the whole affair almost unseen, and who, precisely because she was underestimated by everyone, could go where neither the guard nor I could go, and see what neither of us could see, and in the end say what neither of us was permitted to say. Ravenna Thorne had built her fortress against the watchers of the palace. She had not built it against a child. It had not occurred to her that she needed to. That was her one mistake, and we were about to spend it. I found Corvin Ash that evening, when the feast had guttered down to its candle ends, and the guard was changed, and he came off his post at last. I had sent word by the only safe messenger I had, which was a folded note in a book returned to the household library where he took his supper, because I dared not be seen seeking him out. He read where and when, and he came. We met in the disused music room off the West Gallery, a cold, high chamber full of shrouded instruments where no one went after dark, and I brought Malin, which he did not expect and did not, at first, approve of. "My lady," he said low, when he saw the child, "this is no place for the princess. If we are wrong, we are dismissed. If we are right, we are in the path of a woman who is stealing from the crown and will not stop at us. Either way, she should be nowhere near it." "I'm already near it," Malin said, before I could answer. She had drawn herself up to her full, unimpressive height, and she fixed the tall guard with her dark, steady eyes. "I saw the black box before either of you told me anything. I saw her use it this morning in the hall when everyone else was watching her be gracious. You were watching her hands. I saw you. So I'm already in it, and Tomlin is my friend, and I'm not going to be quiet about it just because I'm 8. She said be quiet again with that same small, terrible weight, and I saw Corvin Ash hear it, saw something flicker behind the discipline of his face. The recognition of a soldier meeting, unexpectedly, another soldier. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he did a thing I had never seen a guard do to a child at court. He did not smile and pat and dismiss. He inclined his head a fraction, the exact grave courtesy he would show an officer. "You saw her use the black box during the ceremony," he said. "You are certain?" "Yes." "Before the Greywater decree?" "Yes, two before, I think. She screened it with her arm. She took something out and put it back." Malin frowned, reaching for precision. "It was small. It fit in her hand." Corvin Ash was silent, and I watched him fit this new fact into the great patient structure he had been building in his head for a year. "That changes what I knew," he said at last, slowly. "I believed she kept the false matrix hidden away in her apartments under lock, brought out only in private. I did not think she would carry it into the throne room itself, under the eyes of the whole court on the one day the seal is watched." He looked at the child with something close to wonder. "But it makes sense. She had 4 forged decrees to seal this year, not one. I have traced 4 grants that the Queen never approved, all sealed in the last 3 months. She could not seal them privately. The Comptroller does not seal alone. There are always witnesses to the honest work. So she sealed them in plain sight in the middle of the honest decrees, screening the black matrix with her hand, trusting that no one watches the Comptroller's hands because no one ever has." He shook his head once. "No one but a guard who has nothing to do but watch, and a child who has nothing to do but watch. We are the 2 kinds of people she does not count." "4 decrees," I said, my stomach turned. "It isn't only Greywater." "Greywater is the largest, but there are 3 more: a grant of quarry rights, a pension diverted, a charter of a mill, all small enough to pass, all funneling to the same place, all sealed with the false matrix so that the record of the crown shows the Queen's own hand." He drew a breath. "It is not a theft, my lady. It is a forgery of the sovereign will 4 times over, and every day it stands it grows harder to pull out because it is now woven into the lawful record. If we do not break it in the next days, while Greywater is still fresh and the ink still wet, it sets like mortar, and then to unpick it you must accuse the Crown's own record of lying, and no court in Eldermore will do that." "So we have to get the black box," Malin said again, patient as a drumbeat. "We have to get the false seal and put it next to the real one." "Yes," Corvin Ash said. "And that is the thing I have not been able to do for a year, because she keeps it on her body or under her lock, and I cannot search her, and I cannot enter her apartments, and the moment I try and fail I am dismissed and she is warned. And here is where the 3 of us in that cold music room found the shape of the plan, and I want to tell it truly because it was not clever and it was not safe, and I have never been entirely at peace with the fact that its hinge was a child. But it was Malin's, and she was right, and I could not think of a better one. She keeps it on her body during the ceremonies," Malin said, "because she has to use it, but after, when the sealing is done, she has to put it away. She can't carry a stolen seal around at the feast. Somebody might see. She has to lock it up." She looked between us. "Where does she lock it up?" "Her apartments," Corvin said. "The Comptroller's chambers in the East Range. There is a strong box. I have seen the door of it. I have never seen inside." "Then that's where the black box is now," Malin said. "Tonight, and there are 2 more days of Founding Day. There's the charter reading tomorrow and the Founders' Feast the day after. If she has more forged papers to seal, she'll take the black box out again, and if she doesn't, it stays in the strong box." She frowned, working it. "We need her to take it out where we can see, where lots of people can see. Not hidden in her chambers, where only she knows." It was, I realized, exactly right, and exactly the reverse of everything the guard and I had been thinking. We had been trying to reach the hidden seal in its hidden box in its hidden strong box, deeper and deeper into the places we could not go. The child had turned it inside out. "Do not chase the seal into the dark," she was saying. "Make her bring it into the light." "The charter reading," Corvin Ash said slowly. "Tomorrow. It is the second great sealing of Founding Day, the confirmation of the town charters, 30 of them, read and sealed in open court. She will sit in state again with the box, and she will seal the honest charters before the whole assembly. He looked up. And I have reason to believe there is a fifth forged decree not yet sealed, a grant she could not fit into today's reading. If there is, she will seal it tomorrow in the middle of the honest 30 with the black matrix, screened by her hand. Then tomorrow, I said, we watch her hand, all three of us, and we find a way to make her show the black box to the whole court, so that when we say she has 2 seals, 300 people have seen it with their own eyes and she cannot smile it away. And then, said Malin, with the flat certainty of the very young, somebody has to stand up in front of everybody and say it, out loud. Because if nobody says it out loud, everybody will just look at their plates and pretend, the way they did when I told them at supper. I know how grown-ups are. They'll all decide together that they didn't see it. Somebody has to say it so loud they can't. She was right about that too, and it frightened me more than all the rest, because I knew already, sitting in that cold room, that neither the guard nor I could be the one to say it. Corvin Ash was bound by his oath. A guard who spoke in open court against the Comptroller, even with proof in his hand, broke the discipline that was the whole of his standing, and Ravenna Thorne would turn that breaking against him. A guard forgets his place, hysterical, insubordinate, dismiss him and doubt everything he touched. And I was a lady in waiting, invisible by trade. My voice in that hall would carry exactly the weight the court had always given me, which was none, and she would drown me the way she had drowned Malin at no supper I had witnessed but could perfectly imagine. The 2 of us who most wanted to speak were the 2 whose speaking she had already armored herself against. That was the trap, still holding even now. There was only one voice in the palace that Ravenna Thorne had not armored herself against, because it had never once occurred to her that it might need answering. I looked at Malin, and Malin, who missed nothing, looked back at me and understood and lifted her small chin and did not look away. "I'll say it," she said. "Princess." "I'll say it," she said again, "if you get her to show the box. You get the box into the light and I'll say it out loud where everybody can hear. I'm not scared of her." Her jaw set. "She's scared of me. That's why she wants me to be quiet." Out of the mouth of a child. "She's scared of me. That's why she wants me to be quiet." I have turned that sentence over 10,000 times since, and I have never found the bottom of its wisdom. The powerful do not silence the harmless. They silence the ones who see. Ravenna Thorne had spent 6 years making certain the palace's watchers stayed quiet, and the surest sign that a watcher matters is the trouble a guilty power takes to hush them. Every be quiet Malin had ever been handed was, if you turned it over, a confession that she had been seen. We parted before the watch changed. Corvin Ash returned to his quarters, and I took the princess back to the nursery by the servant's stair, and I lay awake a second night, and for the first time the sleeplessness did not feel like fear. It felt like the eve of something. I should have known better than to feel hopeful. Ravenna Thorne had not survived and risen for 6 years by being slow, and while the 3 of us laid our small brave plan in the dark music room, she was, in her own chambers, laying a colder one, because she had marked the watching child at the ceremony, and she was not a woman who left a thing unmanaged twice. The first I knew of it was at breakfast, when the Queen remarked in passing that it was a pity the children would miss the charter reading, but Lady Thorne had been so thoughtful. She had arranged a Founding Day excursion for the young prince and princess, a boat on the lake and a picnic with their tutors, well away from the tedium of a long sealing ceremony no child could enjoy. It had been Lady Thorne's own kind suggestion. Wasn't it kind? I set down my cup very carefully so that my hand would not shake, and I understood that Ravenna Thorne had just, with a smile and a picnic, removed the one voice that could undo her from the one room where it mattered. She had not threatened the child. She had not touched the child. She had simply, graciously, arranged for the child to be somewhere else, on a boat, on a lake, out of the hall, during the exact hour when the black box would come into the light. It was beautifully done. It was, I realized, always beautifully done. And it was, though I did not yet see how, the beginning of her undoing, because a woman clever enough to send a child away is a woman who has admitted, to anyone paying attention, that the child was the danger all along. I had until mid-morning when the boats were to be readied. My first, frightened plan was to run to the Queen and blurt it all out, the black box, the 4 decrees, the boy Tomlin, the picnic that was not a picnic, and I got as far as the door of the Queen's study before the hopelessness of it stopped me cold. I had no proof. A lady's word and a child's word against a decade of the Controller's faithful service, and Ravenna Thorne would be at the Queen's ear within the hour to explain. Gently, that poor Elena Core had grown strange and been filling the princess's head with wild tales, and really it might be kindest to relieve her. And it would be done, and I would be gone, and the child alone on a lake, and the seals set like mortar. To speak without proof was to hand her the last thing she needed to be rid of us all. The trap had not loosened. It had only tightened and put a smiling picnic over its teeth. So I did not go in. I went instead to find Corvin Ash, and I found him already looking for me, and I saw in his face that he had heard about the excursion too. "She's moved," he said low in the shadow of the east stair. "She has taken the princess off the board." "Then we've lost," I said. "Malin was to be the voice if she's on the lake." "We have not lost," he said, and there was something in the flat certainty of it that steadied me even before he explained. "She has made a mistake. Until this morning she was managing 3 watchers she barely credited, an invisible lady, a silent guard, a child no one listens to. She could afford to leave us in place. We were harmless. But she has just spent a great deal of trouble to move the child out of one specific room on one specific morning. Do you understand what that tells anyone who is watching her? It tells them the child is not harmless. It tells them she is afraid of exactly the thing we are afraid she'll do." He almost smiled. On that stone face it was barely a shift. A guilty woman who overplays her hand teaches the whole court where to look. We only have to make sure the court is looking. And then Corvin Ash told me the rest of what he had been building for a year, and I understood that he had never been merely waiting for luck. He had been gathering, slowly, silently from his post, in the way of a man who has nothing to do all day but observe and remember. He had assembled the bones of a case. He knew the 4 forged grants, and where their revenues ran into leases and trusts that all, traced far enough, came home to the house of Marrow, which was Ravenna Thorne's own blood by her mother. He knew the honest sealings from the false ones by the small tell he had trained himself to catch. On the true decrees, the harrow pressed clean and even. On the 4 he suspected, a faint doubling at the base of the rising sun, the ghost of a matrix cut by a lesser hand. And this was the thing that turned my knees to water. Months ago he had quietly preserved a true impression of the real seal, pressed from an old honest decree, sealed in a plain envelope, kept against the day he might set it beside a false one. He had the true seal's fingerprint. All he lacked was the false one to hold up next to it. "That is why the black box matters more than everything," he said. "Not to prove she is a thief. The money trail I could argue and she could argue back and the court would grow tired and side with the woman they know. But the 2 matrices, side by side, the true and the false that no tongue can talk away. It is not an argument. It is a fact you can see. A child could hold them up and every soul in the hall would understand in a breath. That is the proof that cannot be smiled into nothing." He looked at me. "And she has just told us, by sending the princess away, that she means to bring the false matrix into the charter reading today. She would not have troubled to clear the child if there were nothing to hide today. She is going to seal her 5th forgery this morning, with the black box, in open court, and she has removed the one person who might name it." "Then we bring the person back," I said. We did not have long, and what we did in that hour I have never confessed to the Queen, though I think she guessed. The boats were made ready. The children were brought down to the water stair with their tutors, Joran resigned and Malin white-lipped and furious, having understood at once, clever girl, exactly what the sudden picnic was for. And Corvin Ash, who as a guard of the household had every right to be at the water stair overseeing the safety of the royal children on the lake, was there. And it was the simplest thing in the world, in the bustle of loading a boat, for a lady-in-waiting to murmur to the princess's tutor that Her Majesty wished the princess to attend the charter reading after all, a change of plans, and for a guard to lift the princess out of the boat with grave courtesy and set her on the stair, and for the two of us to walk her, quickly and without fuss, back up toward the throne room while the tutors, confused but not daring to gainsay a change of the Queen's wishes conveyed by the Queen's own lady, let it happen. It was a lie. I told the tutor the Queen wished it, and the Queen had wished no such thing, because the Queen knew nothing of any of it. I have made my peace with that lie, because it put the truth in the room. But I will not pretend it was not a lie, and I will not pretend my heart was not in my throat the whole way up that stair, because if I was wrong, if the black box did not come out, if Malin's nerve failed, if the court closed its ranks the way courts do, then I had kidnapped a princess off a picnic boat to accuse the crown's most trusted officer, and there is no honor and no oath in the world that survives being wrong about a thing like that. You came back for me, Malin said, half running to keep up with the guard's stride, and she was not white-lipped now. She was lit. You said you'd say it out loud, I told her. I'm holding you to it. Good, said the Princess of Eldermore, 8 years old, and set her jaw. We slipped her into the throne room by the side door as the charter reading was beginning, and into the family's place beside the empty small chairs, and if anyone marked that the princess who was meant to be on the lake was suddenly in the hall, they marked it only as a small confusion of the day, the sort of thing that is always happening at a great ceremony. The Queen, on her throne, did not see her daughter slip in. She was attending the herald. The prince consort did not. He was attending the Queen. Only one person in that whole hall saw the child return to the room, and I was watching for it, and I saw it happen. I saw Lady Ravenna Thorne, serene at her blue-draped table with the box of the household seal before her, glance up as she always glanced up, and find the princess where the princess was not supposed to be. I have never seen a mask slip so little and mean so much. It was the smallest thing, a stillness that came into her ringed hands, a single beat where the serenity did not quite refresh itself. Then it was gone, and she was silver and composed again, and she turned back to her wax. But I had seen it. Corvin Ash at the foot of the dais had seen it. And I think Malin had seen it, because the child settled into her chair with the particular calm of a small hunter who has just watched the large animal notice the snare. The charter reading is longer even than the investiture, 30 town charters read and confirmed and sealed, and I followed not a word of it because I spent the whole of it watching a woman's hands. The herald read, the Comptroller sealed, the charter was carried to the dais and shown and applauded and set aside. Again and again, the red box, the honest wax, the clean firm press. I began to fear there was no fifth forgery, that the black box had stayed in its strong box, and we had gambled everything and lost. And then, past the middle of the 30, between a mill town's charter and a fishing town's, there came a decree that was not a town charter at all. I heard the herald's voice change on it, just slightly, the way a reader's voice changes on a thing he does not quite understand. A confirmation of the grant of the quarry lands of Harrow fell to the trust of, and I saw Lady Ravenna Thorne's arm curve inward to screen her hand, and I saw the lid of the red box stay closed, and I saw her other hand move to a second box, a plain dark box set a little apart on the blue cloth, and I knew, with a cold plunge of the heart, that the black box had come into the light after all, and that everything now turned on the next 60 seconds. Now, breathed Corvin Ash, not aloud. I only saw his lips shape it, the guard granting himself, for the first time in a year, permission to move. He did not shout. He did not draw his weapon, God forbid. There was never any weapon in this. What Corvin Ash did in the great hall of Harrowgate before the assembled court was worse for Ravenna Thorne than any blade. He broke the one rule that made him invisible. He stepped out of his place. A guard steps out of his place perhaps once in a career, and when he does, the whole room feels it before it understands it, the way you feel a picture go crooked on a wall you have passed 1,000 times. 300 people did not know why their eyes went to the foot of the dais, only that something in the furniture of the world had moved. The tall red and black figure that was always still had taken 3 measured paces from his post, and turned and faced not the door, not a threat, but the Comptroller's table, and stood there, at attention, staring directly and unmistakably at the hands of Lady Ravenna Thorne. The herald faltered. The murmur of the court changed its note. The queen, on her throne, sat forward, a small frown gathering, because the queen, of all people, knew what it meant for one of her own guards to leave his post in open court, and knew that no guard of Harrowgate would do such a thing for anything less than a matter of the gravest honor. And Ravenna Thorne, caught with the dark box open under her curved hand, and the false matrix half lifted from it, did the only thing her long cleverness left her to do. She smiled, and she reached for her voice, that voice like cool water that had talked the court in circles for 6 years, to explain the guard away, to name his insolence, to turn 300 pairs of eyes off her hands, and onto his insubordination before anyone thought to ask what he was staring at. "Guardsman," she said, cool and carrying, and every head turned to her exactly as she wished, "you forget your—" "Be quiet." The words came from the side of the throne, from a chair a child was not supposed to be sitting in a voice far too large for the small body it came out of, a clear, high, furious child's voice that cracked across that great stone hall like a slate snapping, and stopped Ravenna Thorne's cool water dead in her throat. Princess Malin was on her feet. She was 8 years old, and she stood no higher than the back of a chair, and she had just told the second most powerful person in the kingdom to be quiet in a voice that filled the whole throne room, and for one endless heartbeat nobody in that hall of 300 so much as breathed. The queen half rose. The Comptroller's mouth was open on the word she had not finished, and into that ringing silence the child walked out from the little chairs, past the astonished tutors who had lost her, out onto the open marble floor of the throne room where 300 of the greatest people in Eldermore stood frozen, and she did not falter, and she did not look at her mother for permission, because she had waited her whole small life for permission, and had finally understood that no one was ever going to give it to her, and that she would have to simply take it. "She has 2 seals," Malin said. Her voice shook now. It had cost her something, that first great shout, and she was a child, and 300 faces were on her, but she did not stop. "Lady Thorne has 2 seals. She has the real one in the red box, and she has a false one in the black box, and she takes it out when she thinks nobody's watching, and she screens it with her arm like this." And the child mimed it, the curved arm, the furtive substitution, exactly as she had mimed it for me on the windowsill, and I heard the court draw one collective breath, because a great many of them had seen, over the years, the Comptroller arrange her papers just so and had thought nothing of it, and were thinking of it now. "She's doing it right now. There's a black box on her table that isn't supposed to be there, and she just took the false seal out of it, and if you make her open her hand you'll see it." "Your Majesty," said Ravenna Thorne, and her voice had found itself again, and it was terrible how quickly it found itself, cool and sorrowful and reasonable, the voice of an adult gently correcting a child's fancy before the whole indulgent court. "Your Majesty, forgive the child. She has been unwell, overexcited by the festival, I'm told, full of stories. The guardsman's strange conduct has clearly frightened her into some fever of the imagination. And she was doing it. I saw it happening. She was reaching out with that voice to gather up the whole room the way she always did, to make them all decide together, kindly, that they had not heard what they had just heard. That it was only a fanciful child and an insubordinate guard and nothing at all to do with the serene silver woman at her table, I saw ministers' faces begin, God help them, to soften into that indulgence. I saw the court reaching for the comfortable lie. She was going to do it. She was going to smile it into nothing, one more time in front of everyone. I said, "Be quiet." Malin's voice cracked out again, and this time there was no shake in it at all. She had turned to face Ravenna Thorne directly, this 8-year-old child, and she pointed one small finger at the woman, and her dark eyes blazed. "You always tell me to be quiet. Everybody always tells me to be quiet. When I said the true thing at supper, you told me I was a tender little child who didn't understand. When I told my brother, he said I was making it up. When I tried to tell Nurse, she said, hush. Everybody tells me to be quiet because I'm 8 and you think being 8 means being wrong." She was shaking now, but with fury, not fear, and it was the most magnificent thing I have ever seen. "Well, I'm not wrong. I saw the black box. I saw it on the eve of Founding Day, and I saw it this morning, and I saw it just now, and you sent me on a boat so I wouldn't be here to see it, and that's how I know I'm right, because you were so scared of a little girl that you tried to put her on a lake." Her small chin came up. "So this time you be quiet, and open your hand. I will remember to the end of my days what it is like to watch a room turn. It does not happen all at once. It happens like ice breaking, a crack, a stillness, another crack, as one face and then another lets go of the comfortable lie and reaches, unwillingly, for the terrible truth." 300 people looked at the child, and then they looked at the Comptroller, and then, every one of them, all together, they looked at Lady Ravenna Thorne's right hand, which was closed, and which was resting on the blue cloth beside a small dark box that had no business being there. And Ravenna Thorne, who had talked her way out of every trap for 6 years, made the last mistake of her career, which was to close her hand tighter. It was nothing, it was the smallest movement. But 300 people saw it, saw the ringed fingers curl protectively over whatever they held, saw the flash of something that was not serenity cross the silver face at last. And in that instant, the room finished turning, and it turned against her, because there is nothing in the world so damning as a person who will not open their hand when everyone has asked them to. "Lady Thorne." The Queen's voice was very quiet, and it went through the hall like a blade through silk. She had risen fully now, and she was not frowning any longer. Her face had gone to the flint I had seen only a few times in 11 years, the flint that meant a thing had been decided. "Open your hand." "Your Majesty, this is absurd. I will not be made to." "Open your hand," said Queen Saralind, "or I will have it opened." And still Ravenna Thorne did not, and it was Corvin Ash who ended it, not by force. He never touched her. He simply stepped forward the last few paces to her table and reached past her closed hand, and lifted the lid of the dark box the rest of the way, and turned it so the court could see. And inside, in a bed of dark velvet, sat a silver seal matrix, the twin of the one that lived in the red box, the Harrow and the rising sun cut fine, but cut, as he had promised, by a lesser hand. "Your Majesty," Corvin Ash said, and his voice in that hall was the first time most of the court had ever heard a guard of Harrowgate speak, and it was low and steady and carried to the last stone of the room. "There is one seal that makes the mark of the crown. There cannot be two. I have kept against this day a true impression of your Majesty's own seal." And from inside his tunic he drew the plain envelope he had carried for months and broke it and laid the old honest impression on the blue cloth beside the false matrix. "And any soul in this hall may come and set them side by side. The true Harrow has 13 teeth. Count the false ones. The true sun rises clean. Look where the false one doubles at its base. It is not the crown's hand. It is a forger's copy of it, and it has been pressed onto 4 decrees this year, and a 5th this morning, all of them granting the revenues of the realm, the quarry of Harrow fell, a diverted pension, a mill, and the wardship of the orphaned estate of Greywater, into holdings that come home, if you trace them, to the house of Marrow, which is Lady Thorne's own blood. The ministers came. That was the thing that finished it, that the great and skeptical men of the court, who had deferred to Ravenna Thorne for a decade, came down off their places one by one and bent over the blue cloth and counted the teeth of a harrow, and stood up with the truth on their faces. The master of the rolls counted and paled. The old chancellor counted and did not speak, only looked at the controller with a grief that was worse than any anger. And Ravenna Thorne stood among them, silver and straight, watching 6 years of careful, patient, invisible theft laid open on a table by a guard who was supposed to be furniture and a child who was supposed to be an ornament. And she did not smile any longer, because there was no one left in the hall for the smile to work on. She tried at the very last the only card she had left, and it was the cruelest, and it failed the most completely. She turned to the queen and she said, in that cool water voice gone suddenly thin, "Your Majesty cannot mean to take the word of a child and a guardsman over the service of—" "The word of a child," said Queen Saralind, "and a guardsman and the seal itself which does not know how to lie. Yes, I do mean exactly that." She came down from the dais. She walked the length of the floor her court had frozen upon, and she did not go first to the controller, or to the ministers, or to the table with its damning silver twins. She went to her daughter. She knelt down on the marble in her gown of blue and silver, in front of the whole assembled court, so that her eyes were level with the eyes of an 8-year-old girl, and she said, in a voice that only those of us nearest heard, but that I will carry to my grave, "You saw a wrong in my house, and you told the truth about it when no one would listen, and they told you to be quiet, and you would not. That is the whole of what a crown is for Malin. You were braver today than any grown soul in this hall. Forgive us. Forgive all of us who told you to be quiet." Malin, who had been magnificent, who had shouted down the second most powerful woman in the kingdom and turned a room of 300, chose that moment to become 8 years old again, and her face crumpled, and she flung her arms around her mother's neck and hid it there, and the queen held her, kneeling on the cold marble, and did not hurry her. The rest is quickly told. Lady Ravenna Thorne was stripped of the household seal that same hour, the true matrix taken from the red box and given, for safekeeping, into the hands of the old chancellor, until a new and honest controller could be found. The 4 forged decrees, and the 5th she had been mid-sealing when the child's voice stopped her, were struck from the record of the crown, unpicked while the mortar was still wet, exactly as Corvin Ash had said they must be. She was not in the end given to a dungeon. Eldermore is not that kind of kingdom, and Saralind is not that kind of queen. She was stripped of her offices, her honors, her holdings, and the ill-got trusts of the House of Marrow, and she was sent from the palace and from the court forever, to live small and quiet and forgotten on the little that was honestly hers, which, for a woman whose whole life had been the accumulation of invisible power, was a punishment I think she felt more keenly than any cell. The last I saw of her, she was walking out through the great doors of the throne room alone, silver and straight to the end, past 300 people who had deferred to her for a decade, and now would not meet her eye, and not one of them said a word, and the silence they gave her was louder than any shout. And Greywater, the estate that had started it, the boy at the bottom of the whole velvet lie, Greywater was made right. The wardship was taken back into the honest keeping of the crown, and the revenues restored, and Queen Saralind rode out herself, before founding day was a week gone, to the big empty house with the lake and the swans, and took her daughter with her, so that the Princess Malin could tell her friend Tomlin herself that no one was going to take his home, because a girl her own age had refused to be quiet. I am told the 2 children fed the swans for an entire afternoon, while the Queen of Eldermore and the boy's new and honest guardians drew up the papers that would keep him safe until he was grown. I was not there, but Malin told me about it after at great length, with particular attention to the swans, and I have never seen a child so purely, uncomplicatedly happy, and I thought, that is what was under all of it. Not the seal, not the court, not the fall of a great and clever woman, a boy and his home and his swans. The child had seen straight to the bottom of it all along, because she had never learned to look anywhere else. Corvin Ash returned to his post. Of course he did. He was offered advancement. The queen wished to raise him and said so, and he declined it, with the grave courtesy of a man declining a thing that would take him away from the work he was made for. He asked only one thing, and the queen granted it, that no guard of Harrowgate would ever again be dismissed for stepping out of his place in the cause of honor, and that a guard who saw a wrong in the house would have a way to be heard that did not cost him his post to use. It is called the guardsman's petition now, and it is a small, quiet thing, and it exists because a man who was trained his whole life to be silent finally decided that some silences are only cowardice wearing honor's coat. He said that to me once, near the end, in the corridor where we first spoke. I have never forgotten it. As for me, I am still a lady-in-waiting. I still carry the queen's letters and keep her small hours quiet and stand behind her chair at the ceremonies with my hands folded and my face composed. From the outside, nothing about me has changed at all, but I have never again told myself that a thing I have seen is not mine to speak of. I saw the seal come down wrong once, and I said nothing, and a boy nearly lost his home, and it took a guard who never moved and a child of 8 to teach me the thing I should have known already, that the whole reason to have eyes is to bear witness with them, and the whole reason to have a voice is to use it when someone has told the ones who cannot use theirs to be quiet. Princess Malin is grown now, or nearly. She is still watchful. She still misses very little, and she is not and will never again be quiet, and no one in the kingdom of Eldermore, from the throne to the kitchen yard, has the smallest wish that she should be. They learned, all of us learned, on a founding day some years ago, what it costs a house to teach its clearest-seeing child that her voice is only an ornament. And they learned what it is worth, what it can undo, and what it can save, the day she finally decided, in a hall full of the powerful and the silent, that she would not be quiet, and stood up on the marble no higher than the back of a chair, and told the truth so loud that no one, not one soul in all that hall, was ever again able to pretend they had not heard it.